So here's the thing. It all started when my dad decided to make the most ridiculous demand ever. He sat me down one night and said, "Since Farhan has kids now, he should get your house." My response. I stared at him for a second, trying to figure out if this was some kind of sick joke, but no, it wasn't. And before I could even get a word in, my mom just gave me that damn smirk. You know the one that says, "Oh, we're going to make you regret this." She piped in right away. "Well, we'll just take it another way then." And that was the moment everything started to spiral out of control. The very next day, I got a call from the bank. They told me my parents tried to access my account. Now, I've been dealing with a lot of stress already, but this was a whole new level of messed up. Before I get too deep into all of this though, let me just say a quick thing. This is one of those situations where you really wish you could press fast forward, hit a reset button, and pretend none of this ever happened. But it did, and trust me, it only gets darker from here. Let me give you some context. Growing up, my brother Farhan was the golden child. I'm talking about full-blown, this kid can do no wrong treatment. While I was busting my ass to get everything I had, Farhan could basically do whatever and still get rewarded. It wasn't just minor favoritism, it was a full-on double standard. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. When Farhan failed out of college, no problem. Mom and dad just paid for him to go to another school. When he wrecked his car driving like an idiot, they bought him a brand new one. Meanwhile, when I made straight A's, it was like they were just barely impressed. A B+. Well, you'd think I had committed some kind of crime. Even our extended family noticed the difference. Holidays became awkward, with relatives constantly pointing out the obvious disparity between how we were treated. And, of course, my parents would defend it like it was some kind of rational decision. Classic. Then, Farhan married Noor. They'd been high school sweethearts. And, honestly, they were perfect for each other in the worst possible way. They were both entitled, spoiled, and expected everything to be handed to them on a silver platter. Noor was no better. The kind of person who throws a tantrum when things don't go exactly the way she wants. But I'll give her credit, she's got a decent heart, even if it's wrapped in layers of entitlement. Fast forward to today. Farhan and Noor now have 2 kids. And, don't get me wrong, my niece and nephew are great, but they became the perfect excuse for my parents to keep showering Farhan with money and resources. Everything they did was for the kids, which I started to notice was just their go-to excuse for throwing all their support into Farhan's life. Every time I pointed out the inequality, it was the kids need this or the kids need that. The real kick in the teeth came when they bought this massive house in one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods. It was way too big, too expensive, and well beyond what they could actually afford. But, of course, that didn't matter. They were all about appearances. It was like they cared more about how it looked than whether they could actually pay for it. Meanwhile, I was still living in a tiny, rundown apartment with 2 roommates, just trying to make ends meet. I worked this brutal finance job 60+ hours a week. I'd come home drained, eat some cheap ramen, and pass out, only to do it all over again the next day. 3 years of my life felt like I was just trying to survive. I didn't go out with friends. I didn't date. I drove the same beat-up Toyota that I'd had since college. And the thought of any small luxury was like a distant dream. But I had a goal. I wanted to buy my own house. Not just any house, something decent. Something that wouldn't make me feel like I was living in a crime-ridden neighborhood. So I saved every penny. 3 years later, I finally had enough for a down payment. I found this modest 3-bedroom house in an okay neighborhood, and honestly, it was perfect for me. It wasn't some fancy mansion, but it was in a good area with solid schools, which would be great for resale value. Not that I had kids, but it was always nice to know that I'd get something back if I ever sold it when I closed on the place. I was beyond proud. This was my house, and no one could take that away from me. But, of course, when I invited my family over for a housewarming, hoping to finally get some recognition for all my hard work, that's when everything went south. My dad walked in, immediately pointed out a crack in the drywall by the door, and asked if I'd checked the foundation. My mom didn't even say congratulations, she just asked when the guest room would be ready for them to visit. Farhan walked in, looked around, and said, "It's cozy," in that condescending tone that clearly meant small, but whatever. I felt like I was punched in the gut, but you know what? It didn't matter. The house was mine, and I was proud of it. I spent every weekend fixing things, making it my own little sanctuary. Meanwhile, Farhan and Noor struggled to make ends meet in their giant, unaffordable house, constantly getting bailed out by my parents. Now, this is where things really start to go off the rails. Farhan lost his job. He'd been working as a sales manager, but with their lifestyle, it wasn't enough. Suddenly, he couldn't keep up with the massive house payments. They missed one payment, then another. My parents tried to help for a while, but soon even they couldn't keep up. 3 months in, and it was looking like foreclosure was inevitable. At this point, things started to get seriously twisted. My parents came up with a plan, and that's where all the messed up stuff really started. So my parents called me over for dinner a couple of months ago. This wasn't unusual. They do these family dinners every few weeks, especially when Mom felt like she hadn't criticized my life choices in person for too long. I didn't think anything of it at first. It was a Tuesday, and I figured it'd be the usual awkward small talk. But when I got there, something felt off right away. Mom had made my favorite meal, the one she only ever makes when she wants something. Dad was acting weirdly nice, asking about work instead of just giving me his usual responses. And then Farhan and Noor showed up, looking stressed but trying to hide it. We barely started eating when Dad cleared his throat. He leaned back in his chair and said, "The most insane thing, since Farhan has kids and you don't, you should give him your house. It just makes sense." I literally froze. My fork was still halfway to my mouth, and I couldn't even chew. I stared at him like he'd just told me the world was flat, or that we were all secretly living in a simulation. My mind was just short-circuiting. Mom, of course, wasn't done. She flashed me that same damn smirk, like she had me cornered. "Oh, Doc, come on, sweetheart. You're young. You don't have a family to worry about. Think of the kids." I almost choked on my food, trying to process what the hell was happening. They literally wanted me to hand over my house, the thing I worked my ass off for, to my brother, just because he had kids and I didn't. I mean, what the hell? I looked at Farhan and Noor, hoping for some sign of them not being in on this plan, but nope. They were sitting there, avoiding eye contact, probably trying not to burst out, laughing at how ridiculous this all was. I couldn't even respond at first. I just said, "No, that's it." I said it simple, direct, no need to sugarcoat it. And that's when everything changed. The temperature in the room dropped, like frosty cold. Mom's smile vanished, and Dad's face got all hard and serious. Farhan and Noor exchanged this look, half panic, half anger. It was like I'd just thrown a grenade into the room. Mom, after a long sip of her water, calmly said, "Well, we'll just take it another way." I was like, what does that mean? That's when I felt this chill run down my spine. Like this was no longer just some messed up conversation about my house. It felt like I'd just been threatened by my own parents. I didn't stick around much longer. I left soon after, still in shock, feeling like I had just narrowly escaped a trap. When I got home, I immediately went through all my important documents, double-checking that everything was locked away in my fireproof safe. And I texted my buddy Ian, telling him what had just happened, just to vent. His response, "Dude, your family is nuts. Change your locks." At the time, I laughed it off as him being dramatic. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how true it was. What did Mom mean by take it another way? It sounded way too ominous, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was coming. But I figured it was just my paranoid mind running wild. A week passed, and honestly, things seemed normal until one morning at work, my phone rang around 10:00 a.m. I looked at the caller ID. It was my bank. I picked it up, and the voice on the other end introduced herself as Melissa from the mortgage department. She asked me if I had recently submitted a mortgage refinance application, and I literally froze. A refinance? What the hell is she talking about? I told her. No, I haven't submitted anything. I'm perfectly happy with my current mortgage. She paused for a second and said, well, someone did. That's when my stomach dropped to my feet. She said they had received a request that morning to refinance my mortgage. And not only that there were some inconsistencies in the documentation that flagged their security system. She told me they hadn't processed anything yet, but it was clear that someone had tried to pull a fast one. I hung up, immediately freaked out, and told my boss I had a family emergency. I drove straight to the bank, hoping it was all a mistake. But nope, when I got there, they pulled up the application, and my blood ran cold. There it was. A full refinance application in my name, but with my parents listed as co-owners. And they had forged my signature using old documents of mine that I'd left at their house years ago. The loan officer pointed out where the system flagged the application because of mismatched signatures and a wrong email address. He told me that if the bank's security system hadn't caught it, my parents might have actually pulled it off. They would have taken over my mortgage and probably my house without me ever knowing. I was furious. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I immediately called my mom to confront her, putting her on speakerphone so the loan officer could hear everything. Mom, I said, you tried to steal my house. There was a long pause. And then, get this, she didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she just said, oh, don't be so dramatic. Dramatic? You tried to steal my house. I was shaking with anger, but I managed to keep my cool and told her I was reporting them for fraud. Her response, you wouldn't do that to your own family. I hung up, turned to the loan officer, and asked, who do I talk to about pressing charges? He directed me to the bank's fraud department, and I walked out of there with copies of all the fraudulent documents. I called Ian again, and this time, his response went from your family is nuts to holy crap. Dude, lawyer up now. So, after I called Ian, I knew I had to do something. Fast. I couldn't just sit around and let my parents walk all over me again. The next day, I took the documents to Ian's cousin, Derek, who was a lawyer. Derek was a straight shooter, and I knew if there was anyone who could help me get through this nightmare, it was him. I showed him everything, the forged documents, the bank's records, even the loan officer's statement that confirmed what my parents had done. Derek wasn't surprised, but the level of rage I felt was hard to contain. Okay, we've got a lot here, Derek said, flipping through the papers. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. That's when Derek dropped a bomb on me. He had done a background check on my parents. And guess what? My dad had been arrested in the 90s for tax fraud. My mom, she was caught using someone else's identity to open credit cards. My entire world felt like it was crumbling in an instant. All those years I'd spent thinking my parents were strict but well-meaning. Turns out, they were actual criminals. Scammers. And I'd been blind to it. Wait, what? I asked, trying to process everything. You're telling me my parents have criminal records? Derek nodded. Your dad had multiple issues with taxes, even claiming expenses for a business that didn't exist. Your mom had several instances of identity theft, all tied to people she knew. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, this is a pattern. I sat there, stunned. How did I not know any of this? All these years, I thought they were just old-fashioned and maybe a little overbearing, but no. They were out-and-out fraudsters. It was like everything I thought I knew about my family was a lie. And there's more, Derek continued, tapping on the psychiatric records I had handed over earlier. This is witness intimidation too. They're trying to ruin your reputation by threatening to release these records. I couldn't even wrap my head around all of this. Not only had they been trying to steal my house, but They had also been playing dirty by pulling out old medical records from when I was a teenager, just to try to destroy my career and personal life. Derek's voice broke through my thoughts again. We've also subpoenaed their financial records. Your parents are drowning in debt. They've maxed out credit cards, taken out multiple high-interest loans, and even borrowed against their life insurance policies. We're talking over $300,000 in debt. These loans look like they came from people who aren't exactly, well, legal. I couldn't breathe. How had I not known any of this? My parents, who'd always lectured me about financial responsibility, were actually financial criminals with a mountain of debt. No wonder they were trying to steal my house. They needed collateral to cover their tracks. What does this mean for the case? I asked, my voice trembling. Derek didn't mince words. It means we've got them, and we've got the leverage we need to move forward with formal charges. But there's one more thing. At this point, I was barely holding it together, but Derek wasn't done yet. We found some irregularities in their records. It looks like they might have been using your identity for more than just the mortgage fraud. I blinked, not sure if I was hearing him right. There's a loan in your name from 6 years ago, he said. It was taken out when you were fresh out of college. Your name was on it, but the address listed was your parents' house. My heart sank. Wait, what do you mean? They used my name for a loan. Yeah, looks like it, Derek said, pushing a folder across the desk. We're still waiting for more documentation from the bank. But this is what we've got so far. They've been using your identity for years. My head was spinning. 6 years ago, I was living in a rundown apartment with 2 roommates, struggling to make ends meet. I was broke, barely making it. And meanwhile, my parents were taking out loans in my name without me knowing. I didn't even know how to feel. Anger, betrayal, I was all of it. Can we confirm this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Derek nodded. We'll have the documentation soon, but in the meantime, I recommend freezing your credit immediately to prevent any new accounts from being opened. We'll also need to file a police report for the identity theft. I followed his advice, freezing my credit that same day. Then I ordered a full credit report to make sure there wasn't more crap hiding in my name. It was like my whole life had been a lie, and I couldn't trust anyone, not even my own family. And that night, just to get away from the madness, I stayed at Ian's place. I needed to breathe, to just step away from it all for a bit. The next morning, I came back home, still in shock. I couldn't believe what I was learning about my parents, about how deep they dug themselves into this mess. And yet, nothing felt real anymore. I kept waiting for the moment when they would call and apologize, when they would admit their wrongs and beg for forgiveness. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. And that's when the next bombshell hit. As I walked into my house, I saw a stack of papers shoved under my front door. At first, I thought it was just junk mail, maybe some kind of threat or legal nonsense. But no, I opened it up, and what I found shook me to the core. It was my psychiatric evaluation from when I was 16. It was like my parents had dug up everything, every mistake I made as a teenager, every rebellion, and used it against me. The papers showed that I had been diagnosed with oppositional, defiant disorder and conduct disorder. And there, at the bottom of the pages, was a note in my mom's handwriting. Remember who you really are. Drop this nonsense, or we'll show everyone, including your work. So now, not only were they trying to steal my house, but they were also threatening to ruin my reputation by dragging up old medical records from when I was a teenager. At this point, I was done. So, after all of the chaos with the old psychiatric records, the loan fraud, the identity theft, I thought nothing else could shock me. But life loves to prove me wrong. The next day, just when I thought I could breathe again, Derek called me. He was clear, but his voice had a certain gravity to it that made my stomach drop. Get over here. We need to talk. I dropped everything. This couldn't be good. When I arrived at his office, Derek slid another folder across the desk. He had a look on his face like he was about to deliver bad news. But this was different. I've been looking into your parents more, Derek began. his tone serious, almost somber, and I've got more information about their financial situation. I didn't even know how to react. How could there be more? They were already deep in fraud, bankruptcy, and debt. How much worse could it get? Derek continued. We got more documentation on that loan from 6 years ago, the one they took out in your name. And there's something else. I stared at him, waiting. He flipped open the folder, revealing pages upon pages of transactions and bank statements. I could barely wrap my mind around it. They've been using your identity to take out other loans too. More than one. It's all tied to that same address, your parents' house. We've been able to trace at least 4 loans in your name, all of them filled out and signed by someone pretending to be you. I felt sick. I'd been living my life, trying to get ahead, working my ass off, and meanwhile, my parents were out there using my name, draining whatever they could, and probably ruining my credit for the future. I had no idea how much of it was out there. I tried to steady my breathing. What does this mean? Fraud, identity theft. You're gonna need to file another police report for this. Derek's words were blunt, but I could hear the anger in his voice. He'd been doing this for a while, but even he was pissed off on my behalf. I was already on edge, and now I felt like I was falling down a rabbit hole with no end in sight. My entire family was a lie, and my parents weren't just manipulative, they were criminals. Okay, so what's next? I asked, trying to hold it together. Derek gave me a sympathetic look. We go forward with this. We're filing charges against your parents for all of this. But before we do that, I need you to approve everything. We have enough to bring the cops in on this. I didn't hesitate for a second. Do it. I was done. This wasn't just a matter of family drama anymore. It was about taking back control of my life. If I didn't do something now, I'd lose everything. My future was already being stolen from me. The next few days were a blur. I spent my time gathering every bit of evidence I could find, making sure I was protected. I froze my credit, filed more police reports, and stayed on high alert. But the most gut-wrenching part, my parents' total lack of remorse. They didn't even care that they were about to lose everything. Then, one evening, as I was sitting in my house, still trying to wrap my head around it all, my phone buzzed with a message from Farhan. He was asking to meet up. I had a feeling about what this was going to be about, but I went anyway. I drove to the Denny's on Main Street, where Farhan's Subaru was parked in the almost empty lot. I slid into the booth across from him. He looked stressed, and honestly, I didn't blame him. But there was something else in his eyes, something that told me this wasn't just about the family drama. What's this about? I asked, my tone sharp. Because if you're here to convince me to drop the charges or give up my house, you're wasting both our time. Farhan hesitated. It's not that. Well, not exactly. I didn't know they actually went through with it, the loans, using your name. They talked about it for years, but I didn't think they'd actually do it. I stared at him, my anger bubbling up. So you knew they were using my name and didn't say anything. Farhan held his hands up, defensively. No, not for sure, but they mentioned it. I tried to tell them it was a bad idea, but yeah. But you didn't stop them, did you? I interrupted. He went quiet, and I could see it on his face. He was embarrassed, but then he looked at me, a little defeated. Look, you're right. I should have done something. I didn't realize how deep they were in it. But they're not just trying to get your house. They're desperate. They owe over $100,000 to loan sharks. One of them even said they knew where my kids go to school. My blood ran cold. Farhan continued, voice shaky. They weren't just trying to get your house. They needed something to give them leverage. Collateral. They were desperate. Then he dropped the biggest bombshell of all. They've been taking out loans in my kids' names too. Your niece and nephew toddlers. They used their social security numbers to open credit accounts and take out loans worth thousands of dollars. They're going to find out when they turn 18 and try to get student loans or credit cards. It's a mess. I felt a surge of anger and sadness flood me. At the same time, Farhan and Noor's kids, my niece and nephew, were innocent. They had nothing to do with any of this. and now they were going to pay for their grandparents' stupidity and greed. Farhan looked ashamed, his voice almost cracking. I need your help to fix their credit. I can't do this alone. If Noor finds out, she'll leave me. I'll lose the kids. I took a deep breath, trying to think. Part of me wanted to say, no way, this is your mess to clean up. But the other part, my empathy for the kids, couldn't ignore the fact that they were innocent victims in this whole debacle. I'll help you with the kids, I said finally. But I'm not dropping the charges against Mom and Dad, and I'm definitely not giving up my house. Farhan nodded, relieved, but I could see the weight of everything in his eyes. As I left the diner, I called Derek immediately. I filled him in on everything Farhan had said, and Derek was quick to tell me to document it all. He also warned me to stay vigilant about security. My parents weren't done yet, and I could feel it in my gut. Something else was coming. That night, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. I installed a Ring doorbell and motion sensor lights around my house. Looked like I was prepping for the apocalypse, but I wasn't taking any chances. The next day, I got an email from Derek. The loan from 6 years ago, the evidence was conclusive, my forged signature, my parents' fingerprints all over it, and, most damning of all, my mom had walked into a bank pretending to be helping her son. But all along, she knew she was committing fraud. At that point, we had enough to press charges for fraud, identity theft, and witness intimidation. It was time to make the final move. Around 8:00 p.m. that night, just as it was getting dark, I heard a car pull into my driveway. I checked the camera feed on my phone, my parents' Lexus. My heart started racing. This was it. They were here. I texted Derek. They're here. Recording everything. I opened the door. Mom wasted no time. Snapping. Really. Over a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. I shot back. You tried to steal my house. Don't play the victim now! Dad stepped forward, jabbing his finger at me. Lower your voice. We're still your parents. Parents don't steal from their kids. I spat. Do you even realize how heartless you've become? I said. You gave me nothing but trust issues and therapy bills. Mom's face went red, and I saw Dad move, like he was about to charge at me. But that's when the doorbell rang. It was the police, and they weren't here to chat. They were arrested that night. My mom got 3 years, and Dad got 5 because of his prior convictions. Farhan had to fight to clear his kids' names, but eventually, he managed to do it. Noor left him, though. She took the kids and moved back to her parents' house. As for me, I kept my house. I installed a full security system and got a German Shepherd named Rex, who would definitely keep anyone unwanted at bay. I haven't spoken to my parents since their sentencing, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever will. Farhan and I are still in touch, but things are strained. We're civil. But the past is hard to forget. I always thought family meant something, that no matter what, your parents would have your back. But mine, they didn't see me as a son, they saw me as a resource to exploit. I don't regret turning them in, not for a second, because, at the end of the day, I still have my house, my freedom, and my dignity, and that's more than they ever gave me.